Welcome to True Crime Pulse, where we uncover the darkest secrets lurking in the shadows of ordinary lives. In today's gripping episode, a husband's secret gay affair with his boss unleashes a devastating chain of events. The betrayal not only destroys his family but ends in shocking violence, leaving everyone stunned by the wife's unimaginable response. Rob Sanders, 36, seemed to have it all. As a mid-level accountant in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he lived the picture-perfect life, a stable career, a devoted wife, Jessie, of 12 years, and 2 beautiful children. The couple's love story began in 1995 at a church potluck, where Jessie's famous lemon bars caught Rob's eye. Their shared faith grew into a bond that led to a small, joyful wedding 2 years later, surrounded by loved ones and the promise of a bright future. For years, Rob and Jessie appeared to be the embodiment of happiness. Their home was filled with family traditions and Jessie's unwavering support for Rob's career. But beneath the surface, Rob wrestled with a secret that threatened to unravel his entire world. Raised in a devout Christian household, Rob suppressed feelings of attraction to men, burying them beneath his faith and family responsibilities. Yet, as time passed, his hidden desires became too heavy to ignore. By 2008, Rob began to explore this forbidden side of himself. What started as discreet visits to adult websites escalated into physical encounters at local bars like Tulsa's Majestic Lounge. These fleeting moments led him into a dangerous affair with his boss, David Carlisle, during a business trip that crossed professional boundaries. The affair was intoxicating yet terrifying. Rob lived in constant fear of exposure, dreading the fallout that could destroy his job, family, and reputation. But the thrill of his secret life was impossible to resist. By 2009, the strain of his double life began to show. Jessie's announcement of a new pregnancy should have been a joyous moment, but for Rob, it only deepened his guilt. He knew he had exposed her to HIV through his reckless actions, a secret he struggled to conceal as his behavior grew increasingly erratic. Rob's world was spiraling out of control. At work, he avoided David's growing jealousy and demands. At home, he became withdrawn, choosing long drives and late nights at the office over family time. The facade of a perfect life crumbled, and on April 23, 2009, the truth would finally emerge. That afternoon, Jessie returned home from errands with their children to find an eerily quiet house. Calling for Rob, she discovered him collapsed near the kitchen table, a half-empty glass of iced tea nearby. At first, she thought he had fainted, but the chilling stillness of his body told her otherwise. Panic consumed her as she called 911, her voice trembling with desperation. Paramedics arrived swiftly, but their efforts to revive Rob were futile. He was pronounced dead on the scene, leaving Jessie in inconsolable shock. Neighbors gathered outside, drawn by sirens and Jessie's anguished cries. The initial belief was a sudden medical emergency. However, the autopsy revealed a far darker truth. Rob's organs showed clear signs of poisoning. What began as a tragic loss quickly escalated into a chilling criminal investigation, as authorities unraveled the sinister events leading to his death. On the evening of April 23, 2009, Tulsa police arrived at the Sanders residence shortly after Rob Sanders was pronounced dead. Detective Brian Callahan, a seasoned investigator with 15 years on the force, led the investigation. Known for his sharp instincts and meticulous approach, Callahan quickly began assessing the scene. The home was immaculate, with no signs of forced entry or struggle. Rob's body was discovered near the kitchen table, next to a glass of iced tea, one of his favorite beverages. Paramedics had set the glass aside as potential evidence, a decision that would later prove pivotal. The following morning, the autopsy revealed troubling results. The medical examiner identified acute kidney failure and crystal deposits in Rob's organs, hallmarks of ethylene glycol poisoning, a toxic substance commonly found in antifreeze. Toxicology tests confirmed that Rob had ingested the poison several hours before his death. What had initially appeared to be a natural or accidental death now pointed unmistakably to foul play. Adding another layer of complexity to the case, post-mortem blood tests revealed that Rob was HIV positive and had contracted other sexually transmitted infections. For Callahan, this revelation was shocking and at odds with Rob's outward image as a devout Christian husband and father who regularly attended church and participated in community events. As detectives combed through the Sanders home, more peculiar findings came to light. Rob's laptop, retrieved from his home office, revealed a history of visits to gay dating websites and searches for explicit material catering to men. Further investigation uncovered an exchange of messages and emails with a contact saved as Hot Buns, later identified as David Carlisle, Rob's boss. These discoveries painted a vastly different picture of Rob's personal life, far removed from the wholesome persona he presented to friends and family. Detectives turned their attention to Jessie Sanders, Rob's wife. Initially treated as a grieving widow, Jessie's behavior soon raised suspicions. Known for her involvement in church and the local community theater, Jessie had a reputation for being dramatic and emotional. Her grief struck some investigators as overly theatrical, which, combined with new evidence, deepened their doubts. A search of Jessie's laptop revealed alarming search queries in the weeks leading up to Rob's death. Investigators found phrases such as how to poison someone without them knowing, antifreeze poisoning symptoms, and undetectable poisons that mimic natural causes of death. Additionally, detectives discovered that Jessie had recently visited websites selling ethylene glycol, the very substance that caused Rob's fatal poisoning. When confronted with this evidence, Jessie initially denied any involvement and responded with exaggerated displays of grief. According to Detective Callahan, her reaction seemed more performative than genuine. She cried, clutched her chest, and even pretended to vomit, Callahan later recounted. It felt more like a scene from a play than someone experiencing real loss. When investigators informed Jessie of Rob's HIV diagnosis, her response was explosive. She screamed, slammed her fists on the table, and declared she did not know his health issues or infidelity. However, her dramatic outburst only increased the team's skepticism, particularly given her background in theater. Jessie maintained her innocence, insisting that Rob had been a perfect husband and father, and that she had no reason to harm him. Detectives began to piece together the strained dynamics within the Sanders household. Interviews with friends and neighbors revealed that Jessie had become increasingly withdrawn and irritable in the months leading up to Rob's death. Some neighbors noted her frustration with Rob's longer work hours and frequent absences from home. She had a way of making everything about her, one neighbor observed, but you could tell something was eating her up inside. While Jessie remained a primary suspect, police also investigated David Carlisle, Rob's boss and secret lover. David, a 48-year-old executive at Rob's accounting firm, was a polished and charismatic figure with a seemingly perfect family life. However, investigators soon uncovered his hidden double life. David admitted to having an affair with Rob, which began during a late-night work trip and escalated into a year-long relationship. David described their relationship as passionate but increasingly fraught. He revealed that Rob had recently made veiled threats to expose their affair after David tried to distance himself. He said he'd tell my wife and ruin my career, David admitted during interrogation. Despite his outward professionalism, David confessed to a pattern of risky behavior, including unprotected encounters with multiple partners. He claimed to be unaware of his HIV-positive status, but acknowledged that his lifestyle made him a likely carrier of the virus. Investigators unearthed receipts and records showing David's frequent visits to gay bars in nearby cities, such as Tulsa's Club Majestic and Oklahoma City's The Copa, far from the eyes of his professional and personal circles. These findings confirmed that David, like Rob, had been living a double life. With mounting evidence against Jessie and David, police faced a complex web of betrayal, deception, and heartbreak. As the investigation progressed, it became increasingly clear that Rob Sanders' life and death was far more tangled than anyone had imagined. David's confession provided a clearer picture of Rob Sanders' private struggles, but it also thrust him into a murky pool of suspicion. Investigators couldn't ignore the implications a successful executive, desperate to protect his carefully cultivated reputation, might be capable of silencing the one person who could destroy it. David's frankness about his relationship with Rob was revealing, but his guarded demeanor and selective admissions left the detectives questioning whether he was withholding critical details. The more they pressed, the more it became evident that the truth about David's involvement, or lack thereof, was far from straightforward. As the investigation unfolded, two seismic discoveries reshaped the narrative entirely, adding layers of betrayal and deceit to an already tangled case. The first breakthrough came when detectives delved into Jessie Sanders' medical and phone records, suspecting her tearful facade hid a deeper truth. What they found was explosive. Just 2 weeks before Rob's death, Jessie had been diagnosed as HIV positive, a revelation she had purposefully withheld from authorities. This wasn't the only bombshell. Jessie was also 6 weeks pregnant at the time of her diagnosis, a fact that added a new dimension to her actions and mental state. The timing of Jessie's diagnosis aligned with a disturbing trail of online activity. Forensic analysis of her internet history revealed a chilling series of searches: undetectable poisons, antifreeze poisoning symptoms, and how to kill someone without leaving evidence. These searches, dated in the weeks and days leading up to Rob's death, suggested not only premeditation but also a methodical, deliberate intent to conceal her crime. Combined with records of her visits to a local clinic for counseling related to extreme emotional distress, detectives began to see a woman pushed to her emotional and moral limits. While investigators worked to untangle Jessie's secrets, another discovery emerged that turned the case on its head. Rob had been engaged in a covert affair with Jessie's father, John J.D. Jensen. The revelation, pieced together from Rob's phone records, was both salacious and devastating. Explicit text messages and intimate photographs exchanged between Rob and J.D. left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The irony was as stark as it was shocking. J.D., a 56-year-old retired contractor and vocal proponent of conservative family values, had been living a double life. Interviews with family and friends painted J.D. as a strict but seemingly devoted patriarch, known for his unyielding views on morality and his outspoken criticism of what he called the erosion of traditional Christian ethics. Yet, behind closed doors, J.D. engaged in a series of clandestine sexual relationships with men, all carefully hidden from his family and community. His affair with Rob, however, was different. According to evidence gathered from their correspondence, the relationship wasn't purely physical. It had an emotional depth that set it apart from J.D.'s prior liaisons. The relationship between J.D. and Rob began innocently enough. J.D., a frequent visitor to Jessie's home, often helped with household repairs or spent time with his grandchildren. Over time, their interactions became more personal. J.D. confided in Rob about his lifelong struggles with his sexual identity and the suffocating expectations of his public image. Rob, grappling with his feelings of isolation and shame, found solace in J.D.'s vulnerability. Text messages and emails painted a picture of two men seeking understanding in a world that wouldn't accept them. What began as mutual support spiraled into an affair that would eventually implode, most catastrophically. Detectives now had to grapple with the implications of this relationship. Did J.D.'s shame and fear of exposure drive him to conspire with Jessie to eliminate Rob? Or was J.D. himself a victim of Rob's manipulations? The discovery cast a shadow of suspicion on J.D., whose outward piety now seemed like a desperate attempt to mask a life riddled with contradictions. The dual revelations of Jessie's secret rage over her diagnosis and pregnancy and J.D.'s illicit affair with Rob reframed the investigation entirely. Police now had to determine whether Jessie acted alone out of anger and betrayal, or if she and her father conspired in a shared effort to erase the shame Rob's actions had brought upon their family. As layers of deceit unraveled, detectives were left to piece together a timeline of events that revealed the Sanders family as a cauldron of betrayal, desperation, and explosive secrets. As detectives delved deeper into the case, Jessie's internet search history became a focal point. The records exposed chilling details, including searches for undetectable poisons and how to kill someone with antifreeze. The evidence painted a clear picture of premeditation, driven by Jessie's feelings of betrayal upon discovering Rob's HIV diagnosis and his secret life, including affairs with men and, most devastatingly, with her own father. When confronted, Jessie alternated between vehement denial and tearful outbursts. Her overly dramatic behavior, coupled with her history in community theater, made detectives question her sincerity. On May 5, 2009, Jessie was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. As local news cameras captured her being led away in handcuffs, Jessie shouted a cryptic justification, "I did it for my baby." Her trial, which began in February 2010, became a media sensation. The prosecution described Jessie as a calculating, vengeful woman who had carefully planned her husband's death out of anger and humiliation. Meanwhile, the defense portrayed her as a battered wife, not in the physical sense, but as a victim of emotional and psychological abuse. They argued that Rob's betrayal, recklessness, and knowingly exposing Jessie to HIV constituted a profound violation, driving her to a breaking point. In dramatic testimony, Jessie recounted her heartbreak, claiming she acted out of fear and despair. However, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution. Jessie was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict divided the community, with some sympathizing with Jessie's plight and others condemning her actions as unjustifiable. In prison, Jessie faced the harsh realities of her choices. She gave birth to her son, who was tragically born HIV positive. Raising a child under such circumstances was a constant struggle, both emotionally and logistically. Jessie's life, once rooted in community and faith, was now confined to the walls of a penitentiary, haunted by the irreversible consequences of her actions. Meanwhile, the revelation of Rob's affair with Jessie's father, J.D., shattered the community's perception of him as a moral, conservative figure. Once a vocal advocate of traditional family values, J.D. retreated into obscurity as his double life became public knowledge, leaving behind a legacy tarnished by hypocrisy and scandal. Rob Sanders' death left no life untouched, exposing secrets, betrayals, and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. Though the small town eventually moved on, the scars of the tragedy remained etched into its history, serving as a sobering reminder of the complex web of lies and human frailty that led to Rob's untimely end.